Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Marwan Darwish. I'm an associate professor at Coventry University at the Center for Trust, Peace and Social Relations. And my job today is to chair and facilitate this, this discussion. Let me first tell you the outline of our session, and then I will say a few words about myself. We are going to start by giving our speakers 5 to 7 minutes to give a statement on the issue of remembering the Nakba. And then I'm going to pose 2 questions to them about the current context and looking ahead, the vision or the future. After that, we will have Q&A, and you can post your questions, and I will be getting them through James. Before we start the Q&A, I'm going to give Naeem the opportunity to tell us about some of the activities and update us. And we planned up to 1 hour and 15 minutes for today for this event. So let me first say a few words about myself, and then I will introduce our guest speakers. So as I said, my name is Marwan Darwish. I'm from Al-Fahim, and I've been here for now more than 12, 13 years in the UK. I myself, for many years, been active politically and socially when I lived in Al-Fahim and in Israel and Palestine generally. And talking about the Nakba, I was just thinking, for me, although we are living today, my family live in Al-Fahim, originally we come from Lejeune, which is was a very well-established, actually, small city outside near Megiddo. I remember it took my dad many years to agree to take us there and showing us where they lived and the situation there was in their village. But for me, and what I received from him, the Nakba, or the catastrophe, was really the destruction of the social fabric of this society, the loss of their land, the trauma that they had, and to my life, that we as a family, from being land-owning family, become a cheap labor family. So my dad had to go and work in Israeli sector as a cheap labor. So that is, for me, what the Nakba means. It's the destruction of the social, political, economic structure and its impact on me and my family. Let me introduce our guest speaker. First, let me introduce Haneen and to say, Haneen, ahlan wa sahlan fiki. I heard her the other day also speaking in Al-Fahim. You know, there was a big demonstration in Al-Fahim in one of the interviews. So Haneen is a political activist, a politician, and she was the first Arab woman to be elected to the Israeli parliament, to the Knesset, as part of Balad party. And if I'm correct, you've been in the Knesset for nearly 10 years, from 2009 to 2019. Haneen is very outspoken and on the issue of Palestinians inside Israel and the whole question of Palestine. In 2010, she participated in the Gaza Volterra with the attempt to come to Gaza to break the siege, which is until now being imposed on the Gaza Strip. Our second speaker is Rachel. Rachel, you excuse me to pronounce your family name, Beitarie. Rachel is from Zochrot, which is a word in Hebrew which means remembering. Zochrot is a very unique Israeli NGO that, for those who don't know, which is been established in 2009, basically to raise the question of in Nakba and what's happened in 1948, to promote acknowledgement, understanding, but also to hold the state accountable for the injustice that's happened, and to also try and address the issue of return of refugees with a vision that can be based in equality for the Palestinians and Israeli Jewish in Israel. So, with this introduction, I will start. Haneen, are you ready to go, or I don't know if you got your? Are you ready?
No, I didn't find my notes, so
okay.
I am trying to remember.
Okay,
and
we can start. If you do, you want to? Shall we start with Rachel, and we'll give you a chance to do that? Okay, so we will start with Rachel for 5 to 7 minutes. Rachel, if you can tell us what, from your understanding, where you're standing as Zochrot, what is the Nakba meant, and how do you understand it?
Thank you, Marwan. Thanks, everyone. So from my standing, first of all, as a Jewish Israeli woman, the Nakba is at the very heart of everything that I see wrong around me, and is the most taboo subject in Israeli society today, Nakba and return, because I don't really separate the two. And this is what Zochrot works on, to hold Israeli government, but also Israeli society accountable, to educate about the Nakba, to commemorate the Nakba, and to call for accountability and acknowledgement, and eventually support for the right to return as a solution to where we're at, and I guess we'll talk about it more. So for me, the Nakba is something that I haven't even heard about until I was 25 or so, even though I was born in an ethnically cleansed space. I was born near the uprooted, destroyed town of Isdud, between the villages of Bashit and Sukrer, most of whose residents are now in the Gaza Strip as refugees. And I did not know that those places existed still when my family came there, and that they were destroyed and that their inhabitants were refugees. And I need to learn a lot, but also unlearn a lot of what I've been taught in my Zionist upbringing to understand what the Nakba is. And I want to thank you, Marwan, for the testimony from your family, because every time I hear from a Palestinian, that's a renewed commitment to commemorate, to acknowledge, and to learn and educate. The Nakba is, simply put, a process of ethnic cleansing that is not just historical but ongoing for me, that has started in 1948, or rather peaked in 1948, started even before that with the start of Zionism, and has never ended and is still ongoing today, as we see in Sheikh Jarrah, where we see families that were displaced from Haifa and from Jaffa and are now being displaced, some of them for the third or fourth time or even more than that. And I see it in Jaffa, in the city where I live today, where every street I walk is a remnant of Palestinian life, of the biggest, most flourishing city in Palestine until 1948 that has been almost completely emptied of its residents and its citizens. And we see it in the Gaza Strip, and it's rarely ever mentioned that the problem of Gaza is first and foremost a problem of refugees whose return is prevented, because over 70% of the population in Gaza are refugees from 48. And you can imagine some of them are actually able to see the towns and villages from where they were exiled in 1948 until now, but are not able to return even for a visit because they are locked behind fences in the world's largest prison. So this is the Nakba for me, and the Nakba for me is also Israeli denial and the lies that we tell ourselves and that are in the very heart of our culture and our psyche. And what I would like to say, and maybe that's it for me for now, is that the mission of Zochrot is first and foremost to talk and educate within Israeli society, out of the understanding that the Nakba is also the story of Israelis, Jewish Israelis, and of Israel itself, and that acknowledgement must be achieved for us to think of a real, just, and peaceful solution to the situation. Right now, we have to go back to the cause and look truthfully at the Nakba. As I said, we don't, it's a taboo. We grow up not knowing anything about it. So our mission is to uncover this history that is erased and covered by our education system, by our government, and to let people know what happened, and to let people deal in the minds, in the circles, within our families and universities and schools, and every organization with the truth of the ethnic cleansing that is ongoing here, in order to stop it and in order to restore justice.
Thank you, Rachel, for this introduction. Really made it clear in terms of the accountability and the challenge also that you are facing as an organization, really, to raise this issue within the Israeli Jewish society. I want to move into Haneen and give you the floor. So please,
Yeah.
you have 7 minutes to what is it the Nakba mean for you, and how do you understand it?
Yeah, okay. First of all, I want to thank James, Naim, Marwan, Martin for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you again. I am delighted to be with Rachel, a very courageous woman. I appreciate everything Zochrot is doing. And I think courageous means a lot, not a lot to me, and I think means a lot in our political world and in our reality, because values, the values we believe in, without courage means nothing, in a world, in a very violent world. And for this, I appreciate Rachel and everything Zochrot are doing. Now, In Nakba, it is everything that happens to the Palestinians since 1948 or maybe before. It is the name of the story of the Palestinians. It is the catastrophes, everything we are living. It's our reality. It's the policies Israel is planning for the Palestinians. It is the history and the reality and the present of the Palestinians. It is the name of a colonial project or the outcome and the Palestinian name for a colonial project. Nakba is the Palestinian name for Zionism, for a colonial projects which we are facing at least during the last 100 years. It is to expel the Palestinians, not just from their homes, from their land and from their homeland, but from history and from geography. It's from history. We should, it's a total political elimination of a people. We should not be be recognized as a people. So we don't have a place as a nation, as a people. We don't have a place in the world. We don't have a place in history. We are communities, and each community the world should solve the different problems of each community. The refugees should be relocated in some places. The Palestinians 48 are Arab Israelis. They are nothing. They are distorted entity with distorted identity. They are not Israelis because they are not Jews, and they are not Palestinians because Israel doesn't recognize them as a Palestinian. So to expel the Palestinians from history, from their place, they don't have a place in the world. As a people, I mean, it is, as Richard said, a strategy of ethnic cleansing and of political cleansing. It started as an ethnic cleansing, 1948. It continues now in El-Quds, in Sheikh Jarrah, in the Negev, as ethnic cleansing or replacement in the Negev, but as a continue more as a political cleansing. And it is a very sophisticated project. It is a project and apparatus. It started with ethnic cleansing, continue as a citizenship. A citizenship is also a tool or a strategy of colonizing the Palestinians whom Israel didn't expel in 1948, continue 67 in occupation, and in 2007 in the siege. So this is the story. This is the the emotional side of our reality and the practical side also of our reality. And actually, sometimes it is there is a strong or an empowering side of using the word till now. The optimistic point in this whole story that we didn't erase this concept from our discourse. This means that we didn't close the file of Nakba. If it is still open, it is still open not just from the side of the Israelis by reinventing different tools of colonialism, by being so creative in their colonial oppression, but we also still using this expression in order not just not to forget, in order to counteract this concept, in order to challenge this concept, in order to rethink our defeat. We don't accept our defeat. So we are using this Nakba in order not to make it a masir. Shu masir? Fate, masir? In order, yeah, I will ask my help of my nephew in English. In order not we don't treat Nakba as a fate. It is not our destiny. It is not our destiny. It is like an open file, and we are challenging Nakba. So we are not sadists. but we want to remind ourselves that this was Nakba. It is a human disaster. It is not a natural disaster. And we don't give up. It is a human disaster. And if it is a human disaster, it also by human tools, by human will, by our challenge, we can counteract and challenge this Nakba. And actually, I don't know if because of these last days, I am saying what I will say now, but I can, maybe I can allow myself to be a little bit emotional. And I believe in emotions in politics when you talk about freedom and to struggle, and with this gap of power between the Palestinians and the colonialist Zionism. So you must you must believe in the power of the will and of the power of emotions. And with emotions, I would say this sentence. Sometimes I believe, sometimes, not always, that Palestinians are heroes. It is there is something heroic in this strategy, in this Nakba, because the colonial, what we are facing, it is not just a colonial project. It is a colonial project which succeeded to portray itself or to market itself as a
as a national liberation.
Yeah, it is a colonialist project which is marketing itself as a national liberation project. It is a capitalist movement, Zionism, which succeeded to market itself as a socialist movement. Yani the Labour Party, which began the project, who are the founders of the Israeli state, and who are the founders of this colonialist project, and who are the founders of the settlement project inside 48, are calling themselves a socialist party. So we are facing a colonialist party which markets itself as a national liberation. Capitalism, which is known or has succeeded to market itself as a socialist movement. A right-wing project which is marketing itself within the Western world as a progressive, liberal, secular, and democratic. So they win from two opposite sides. The Zionism wins the support of the right wing and the left wing. The progressive and the extremist from the right wing, the capitalist. So, and we 70 years, we say no. Why we say no? Because we don't need Balfour a promise. We don't need the Quran with Torah, Bible, New Testimony, Old Testimony. We don't need legitimacy. And this is the weak side of Zionism, legitimacy. And this is the strongest side of Palestinians, a huge gap of military power, a huge gap of political maneuver and of wisdom, of political wisdom. And I envy the Zionists, I envy the Israelis, I envy their leaders, I envy their ambitious. And this colonial project, our movement, has a very sophisticated and sophisticated ability to maneuver between a very high ambitious and the reality. They wait for the right moment in order to expand. So when we talk about Israel or we talk about Zionist movement, we talk about a reality in a process. We talk about a development in the colonialist project. The colonialist projects in 1948 is not the same colonialist projects in 2020. We don't talk about Israel as if we talk about the same state in 1948 and in 2020. We are facing different kind of Zionist movement. Now it's more imperialist. Israel wants to be the leader of the region. Israel didn't. I don't think that they imagined to succeed with this تطبيع. شو تطبيع؟
Normalization. The normalization.
with this راح تساعدني كثير مروان. With this normalization agreements with the Arab world, so they became more violent, more oppressive, more violent, not just vis-a-vis the Palestinians and toward the Palestinians, toward the Western, the supporters of the Palestinians, towards the international public opinion, towards anyone who wants to criticize. So it became not just dangerous to the Palestinians. Israel and the Zionist lobby is now very dangerous for the whole world. Israel is now, and this is good and bad. Good. Marwan, انت وقفني, انا بوقفش لحالي. I will not stop myself. You said.
Yeah, you'll have 2 minutes, and then I want to move on to the next one. For 2 minutes.
Now, it's for me because 48. Now to talk about the main strategies of this Nakba, to maintain the maintenance of the Nakba. Nakba needs to make a maintenance system. Nakba needs a maintenance strategy. Why? Because the Palestinians didn't give up. Have Israel expelled 100% of the Palestinians, Nakba would be a history. Have Israel, have the Palestinians give up and treat their Nakba as a natural disaster and as their fate, their masir, then Nakba wouldn't need a maintenance system. The maintenance system of Israel is division of the Palestinian people. This is the main strategy of maintenance of Nakba, to divide by citizenship, by siege. Citizenship is it is not a democratic notion. Within the structure and the context of Palestine, Israel, of the Palestinian-Israeli Zionist struggle, citizenship is a tool of, as I said, control and of colonization. So the division, and this is the power of the last 2 weeks, that there is a weak side of a violent oppression, and the Palestinian issue, and this is the main message of the last 11 days, is that the main strategy of colonization, house demolition, land confiscation, expelling and evacuation and Judaization of Jerusalem, Judaization of the Negev, Judaization of the Galilee, to make the Palestinians live within ghettos. This is tools, not strategies. Maybe we can call these tools. The main strategy to divide the Palestinian people, to divide the Palestinian issue. It is not, there is no Palestinian issue. There is refugee issue. There is an issue of the Palestinians of 48 inside Israel. There is the West Bank issue. And there is Al-Quds issue, Jerusalem, Palestinians within Jerusalem issue, and each case we will solve it with different solution, with different logic. The last 10 days after that.
Before you move in, because this is my next question, let me stop here and then move to the next. What really you started to speak about. But let me, before move to you, Rachel, just to give a couple of sentences of contextualizing, because the question is going to be about the Palestinians in 48, the Palestinians who are living in Israel. So just in 2 sentences to say that after the Nakba, after 1948, the majority of the Palestinians being forced out of Palestine or driven as a result of the war. So only 10%, about 10%, remained in their homeland, in their own villages and towns. And this was around 150, 160,000 people. Today, we have almost 1.7 million Palestinians who live inside Israel. But just to give you some sense of what's happened, so from 48 to 66, this population was under military rule that imposed by Israel, which means you wanted to go for a medical appointment, you want to go to the city, you want to go for work, you want to go to study, you needed permits. And the permit system being controlled by military governor who've been appointed in the towns and cities and villages. But what happened that the fragmentation also that imposed by the state that started to define this community as Muslims, as Christians, as Druze, as Bedouins, and Israeli Arabs, Arabs in Israel, and you name it, a list of my question to you, Rachel, and Haneen. I'll start with you, Rachel. So two parts. One, I want you maybe to tell us how the Palestinian and Israel experiencing apartheid or a discrimination. And the second is more related to what's happening in the last 10 days. I mean, we heard here in the media how everybody was very upset, how the coexistence between Arabs and Jews being broken, how, you know, nobody expected this would happen. You know, people were very upset, you know, I mean, talking media here, reporting. So how do you understand what's happened? How do you analyze what happened? I'll start with you and then I'll move to Haneen. So I'll give you, 5, 6, 7 minutes to do the question, and then we'll move to Haneen.
Yeah, I can just continue to listen to Haneen forever. Haneen, thank you. I admire your courage and resilience so much. I would not talk about the Palestinian experience since I'm not Palestinian. I would like to say this though. We are talking sometimes about Palestinian citizens of Israel, and I would always put the citizens in big quotation marks, because really Israel has no concept of citizenship at all for anyone, not even for Jews. Israel, the Israeli regime, has always seen itself as representing all Jews in the world, all of Jewish history, and not representing the actual people that it rules. That's one. And second, it definitely has never treated Palestinians as full citizens in the Jewish state, even if they're Israeli passport holders. And this is manifested in many, many laws, from the Nakba law to the nation state law, etc., etc., even marriage laws. And in practices that, as Haneen says, continues, the Nakba really continues to shrink the spaces where Palestinians can live, restrict them to narrower and narrower areas, denying them their full rights and really their full humanity. And we see it more and more blatantly, and we have seen it maybe more blatantly than ever in the past 10 days in the Israeli media, that was talking so casually about the killing of children in Gaza, referring casually to rioters in the so-called mixed cities as people who should be shot, even though they are supposedly citizens. And this has been more painful than ever to watch, but really speaking about the courage and resilience of Palestinian people with all those tactics of divide and conquer, the different citizenry status, the walls, the divisions between people. We see people coming together, whether they're inside the 48 borders or in Gaza or the West Bank or Jerusalem, or even in exile in Lebanon, in Jordan, around the world. We see people coming together and we see one struggle. It's very evident, and I'm going back to Jaffa where I live, that again, the Palestinian community here is the survivors of the Nakba. The 5% or so of Jaffan Palestinians who remained in the city after the Nakba were put in an actual ghetto. It was called a ghetto after 48 and back in the 50s, surrounded by fence, and stayed there for years, and are still in the city now and are being pushed or ethnically cleansed out of the city as we speak in different tactics, scare tactics or economic measures and so on. And you see them rising up, and the media calls it riots, but it's not a riot, it's an uprising. And it's a real practice of sumud. Sumud, Marwan, how would you translate it? Stand your ground, maybe.
Sumud is resilience, steadfastness, refusing to cooperate with the power, with the occupation.
Exactly, and stand your ground and stay while they're trying to exile you, to dispossess you. And I have seen it with my neighbors in the last 10 days that are actually standing guard every night outside their homes in the neighborhoods to guard against both radical right gangs and the police that are coming to harm their families. So this is not some abstract concept. This is everyday reality. It has been more evident in the past 10 days. We have seen a lot of organizing around it, and we have seen complete disregard from Israeli authorities and Israeli media and most of the Israeli public to what this actually is. Because you asked about the coexistence, so I think it was Emil Habibi that many years ago talked about it as coexistence between a horse and a rider. And it is Dr. Fatma Qassem who speaks of the so-called mixed cities as a nonsensical term, really, because a city is mixed and heterogeneous by nature, right? There isn't a city that isn't mixed. And what we mean by that in Israel, when they say mixed city, it means a city whose ethnic cleansing wasn't complete. And there are continuous attempts to complete the process in Jaffa, in Lod, in Ramle, in Haifa, in Akka, and so on. So we cannot speak of coexistence if there isn't recognition of Palestinian existence at all. Israeli society is only willing to accept Palestinians if they give up on what makes them Palestinians, on their story, on their identity, and even then they will only be second-class citizens. So we need to be truthful about that, and we need to see this as it is. We need to see it as an uprising of the whole Palestinian people, of one more step in an ongoing, resilient, steadfast, courageous Palestinian resistance. And I know as Israeli, I need to do everything I can to be in solidarity with this. And I think anybody around the world has a role to play in being in solidarity and in pushing this process forward.
Thank you, Rachel, for demystifying this concept of coexistence and putting it really in the term of the power relation. Haneen, I want to move to you and want you to try and in 5 minutes to tell us how do you understand, because I have another question for you, which is the future while we look, but now how do you, I heard you speaking the last few days, but how do you explain, how do you understand what happened in the last 10 days in terms of the role that the Palestinians inside Israel in 48 played, and what did this mean?
Yeah, a very important question, and I need, okay. You will not believe, because I didn't believe, the gap of perception between the two people, the Israelis and the Palestinians in 48, let alone in West Bank, Gaza. Let's talk about 48. It is as if we are living in two different worlds. We have zero common ground of understanding about what happens. Zero. We live together. After 70 years, if you are a Palestinian, you will be amazed how much they don't understand you. And I will try to explain. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the main understanding of the Israelis. It is a Jewish state. Everything was okay before. We was not a racist state. The Palestinians didn't face any discrimination. They live with very good conditions. They live better than the Palestinians anywhere in the world. Better than the Palestinians. Gaza, they forget that they destroyed Gaza. They live better than the Syrian in Bashar al-Assad, which he is a criminal. So they were surprised. No logical reasons for this. Why you are appraising? Why it's not appraising? Of course, they don't use the word. I will tell you what the word they use. Why you are going out on the streets? There is no logic in what we did, in the perceptions and in the eyes of the Israelis. But how they interpret how they frame our demonstrations and our uprising, not in a political discourse. In the second Intifada, we were terrorists when we went out on the street demonstrating and supporting our Palestinian people in the second Intifada. In this time, we were not terrorists. We were mushaghibin zu'ran.
Criminal.
It was a criminal act. It was not a political act. And the Israeli media didn't cover anything in Nazareth, in Majdi Krum, in al-Fahim a little bit. 95% of the media coverage was, as Rachel said, in the mixed, the Palestinian, the mixed towns. Why? Because in the mixed town, we witnessed on the margins, the clashes. But the mixed town, which is 10% of the Palestinian population, suddenly they covered 95% of the coverage. The percentage of Palestinians who live in the mixed town is 11%, not more. But suddenly there was no talk, no discussion about the 90% who went out of the street, just demonstrating and challenging the police. Yes, challenging the police, but without any clashes with the Israelis. And within this 10%, they concentrate on the 10% who maybe attacked the Jewish citizens, but the number of I think, and Rachel, correct me if I am wrong, the number of Palestinians who attacked Israelis was not more than the number of the Israelis who attacked Palestinians. And in the media, it is extremist. It is the liberal discourse, extremist from both sides. It's extremist. They refuse to face the fact that it was a political, we wanted to send a political message that doesn't want to recognize that we are not Arab Israelis, we are Palestinians. They refuse to believe, to think about that 70 years of Israeli, of distortion of our identity, of oppression, didn't make us Israelis, didn't make us anything less than Palestinians. They don't, it was for the first time that they didn't say to us terrorists. And I felt, يا ريت حكوا قالوا لنا terrorists. I wish they call us terrorists. At least terrorist is a political framing of the situation. It's a political framing. We are enemies. Yes, we are enemies. I am the enemy of Zionism. You oppress me, I am your enemy. Yeah, I don't feel humiliation when you think of me as an enemy. No, an enemy for Zionism, and for Zionists, not for the Jews, not for the people of racist people. I am an enemy. For racist attitudes, I am an enemy. And I hold a vision of a state for all the citizens. I want to coexist with you. I am the one who wants to coexist with you. So don't talk to me about coexistence. You don't want to coexist with me. You want to replace me. But facts, the media coverage for the first time was apolitical, anti-political. They didn't say, and they say it, 95% of the Palestinians doesn't want, of the Arab Israelis, sorry, 95% of the Arab Israelis, no, 99% of the Arab Israelis don't want this. They are so good. They want to coexist. And when they مدحونا, لما كانوا يمدحوا, it is مدح أسوأ من الذم.
They're praising the Palestinians.
Yeah, the way they praise is the Arab Israelis, that we are good citizens, we are the good Arabs, we don't want to make any troubles, we don't adopt this kind of challenge. The way they price us, it is worse than to condemn the condemnation. Yeah, it's better to condemn us that we are challenging politics, that no, we refuse to be Mu'asralin, we are part of the Palestinian people. It was a way of framing what happened in a very negative, in a very positive way for 99%, but we have this 1% who are extremists, who don't represent Arab Israelis. And this is, we have nothing in common regarding conception of reality, regarding framing the reality. And if anyone, and there were on the margins of the media a discourse that, okay, the Arab Israelis face a little bit discrimination here and there, but for the mainstream, for 78%, and I will tell you why I'm mentioning, taking this specific percentage. For 78% of the Israelis, there is no discrimination, there is no racism. Why? Because according to the index of democracy of the Israeli Institute for Democracy, an Israeli institute, 78% think that there is no contradiction between securing or providing privileges to the Jews on the expense of the Arab Israelis and democracy. There is no contradiction. For them, democracy is to give Allah Amber. For them, democracy is to give privileges because we are in a Jewish state. If we are in a Jewish state, so this Jewish state has a very specific definition of democracy. And in Sha'b Allah al-Mukhtar, 40% of them believe that they are the chosen people. 40% of the Israelis believe that they are chosen people. If we are chosen people, so we have our own definition of democracy, our own definition of morality. And because of this, the Israeli military, the Israeli military is the most ethical army in the world because they have their own definition of democracy and their own definition of ethics. And in Israel, democracy means to give privileges to the Jews. Really, I am not joking. It's an absurdity, but I am not responsible about this. So for them, to break this status quo is a negative. For the Palestinians, for the oppressor, breaking the status quo is always a good thing. Is always a step towards the justice if we invest this in a political project, within a political aim and a political strategy and a unity, etc., etc. So everything was okay. Breaking the status quo was just from an extremist. This is the Israeli interpretation, the Palestinian interpretation inside Israel. It is a very natural reaction to all your oppression, to all what you are doing in Jerusalem. It is in Jerusalem. We are part of the Palestinian people. We reacted as Palestinians, not as citizens. To frame the interpretation is to understand it as to understand the behavior of the Palestinians as behavior of Palestinians, regardless we are citizens or not. First of all, we are Palestinians. But then after that, citizenship will have its implications in different meanings. So it's a spontaneous reaction. You are expelling our people in Sheikh Jarrah, Judaizing Jerusalem. You are attacking al-Musallin, prayers in Al-Aqsa. You want to Judaize the stairs in front of Bab al-Amud. The only space which remains to the Palestinians in Jerusalem after Israel has locked down and locked all the Palestinian institutions in Jerusalem after the second Intifada. There is no public space for the Palestinians, and Al-Aqsa Ras al-Amud, the stairs which the police in Ramadan make provocations to the Palestinian youth and prevent them from sitting down on the stairs after iftar. So this kinds of provocation, this was a reaction, and of course a reaction of our own humiliation, also as citizens. So it's the two sides. It's a political reaction of oppression and of humiliation. It is not Zohran. It is not a criminal reaction from 1%. It represents 85. Now, if you want to do a poll, 85% will say we agree. Okay. Now some of this 85 will feel fear. Fear come after. First of all, there is ghadab, anger. There is your anger.
Haneen, I'm sorry to stop because I wanted to move to, because we have little time for people to ask questions. So in a minute, let's say, so what is the vision that you and Rachel, how do you see, what is the vision for you? You said I wanted to also speak about the vision. So what is the vision? And I will move then to Haneen, and then I have some questions, you can address some of that back, Haneen.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, the vision is liberation. And I don't just mean Palestinian liberation. I'm, after all, Jewish Israeli. And my wish is to also liberate myself and my people from being oppressors, from being colonizers. and move into a land, a country, a space that we can share as equals, as true citizens, as true human beings, without this gruesome dehumanization that resolve to bloodshed again and again. So for me, liberation of the whole of Palestine from Zionist regime and from Zionist thinking, decolonization and return of the Palestinian refugees, and an equal, just, peaceful society for everyone who lives here, regardless of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, etc. This is the vision. This is what I want and wish for Palestinians, for myself, for my family and friends, and for everyone. The way to get there, I think that's the trickier part, because we are very, very far from this reality, and if anything, seems like we are moving farther from it. And Israelis are being more adept at closing their eyes to the truth and to justice, and that's it's a difficult wall to tear down, really. But I think the way is to go through the cracks in the wall. This is something we do at Zochrot. We identify where there are cracks, where there are omissions and deletion and missing pieces of history, and we try to fill this gap with information and with vision of how would you like to live, really. This is what I say to Israeli usually. They say, like, your solution is not practical, or whatever. So is your solution practical? Yeah. Do you want to send your children to the army for all eternities? I really don't think anyone wants it. I think Israelis are in a deep state of denial and really schizophrenia even, and unfortunately drunk on power. That pains me very much to say that, because I do love my people after all. But I think if Judaism tells us anything, is that if you love someone, you should tell them the truth, in order to liberate ourselves as well.
Thank you.
It's a long path. I think Palestinian freedom fighters like Haneen, like the young Palestinians in the streets everywhere, are showing us the way. And we need to follow their lead, and we need to develop this vision in as concrete terms as we can, and start building a real political option for return and a just, equal society to all.
Thank you very much. Haneen, in 1 minute, because I have also some questions for you, but really in 1 minute.
Stop me. Stop me after 60 minutes.
Well, I was.
Myself.
You know, what is the vision? How do you see that?
I will stop immediately.
Yes, the vision in 1 minute.
Yeah, I will not say anything more than Rachel said about the vision. Okay. I adopt her vision 100%. And it is 3 remarks for the Palestinians. It is a historical compromise for the indigenous people to talk about one state, democracy, equal rights, equal national and civic rights, liberty. What Rachel said, liberty. It's liberty. It's freedom. It's justice, and it is coexistence with the Israelis. For me, it's a justice. Maybe justice and liberation means, for I don't theoretically may it mean that the Zionists, the Israelis, should they go back? For me, no. I want to live with Rachel. and I want to live with those who recognize me. If you insist to replace me, then maybe I will say to you, okay, you cannot replace me, so choose some place else. But for me, it is for both, and Rachel said, to decolonize the Israelis. It's an opportunity. This liberation is not just to liberate the Palestinians, it is to liberate the colonialists, to liberate, to dismantle, to differentiate between Zionism and Jewish, between Zionism and Israelis. And I think this is a liberation for the Israelis, as I said. It will not come out of an internal development without the Israeli society. The Israeli society will not be convinced that they must end their oppression. So the solution, it is the struggle of the Palestinians and accountability, international accountability and Palestinian struggle.
Thank
and
you.
For me, struggle is a popular struggle. And last sentence, legitimacy. For Israel, it is a very sensitive. Yes, I agree with Rachel. She said that we are going away from liberation. Yes and no, it depends. Depends about the Palestinians, not about the Israelis, because the Israelis want to go more deep on their operation, but then it depends to the Palestinians. The question is what the Palestinians will do, not what the Israelis will do. The Israelis is so clear what they want to do. They want to become more and more fascist. Now it's a fascist. It was a racist and apartheid and colonialism in 1948. Now it's a fascist also. Legitimacy. This is كلمة ذهبية. It's a key word because now more and more international Human Rights Watch, OSCWA talk about Israel as and recognize that Israel is an apartheid, that Israel is a colonialist regime, and this is the weakest aspect of Israel legitimacy.
Thank you very much. And for all of you, and I apologize for the participants because it did take much longer than we planned, but it was very, very interesting, challenging. I have some of the questions actually you did address, in your talk. I want to move on to Naeem. Are you with us, Naeem? So before giving you some of the questions, Naeem, have some announcements, and then I would pose some of the questions that you didn't address.
Okay, and I think it's been very illuminating listening to the Haneen and Rachel about what's actually happening in the 1948 borders. And I think both Haneen and Rachel pointed out accountability is the key to making a change. And I think that's our job, to make sure that Israel is held accountable. And I think BDS is part and parcel of that accountability. So I think in Britain, we are facing several challenges as a solidarity movement. I think this week, last Monday just gone, a court case should have started against people who occupied the Israeli factory that manufactures engines for the drones in Shanstone. But that case was postponed because no British government would risk going to court in the environment in which there is so much support for the Palestinians. And I think we need to build on that. So I think the things that are coming in the next few weeks, one thing is the debate on sanctions. And I think that again had a real push from what the events took place in Gaza, in Jerusalem, and in the West Bank, and Sheikh Jarrah particularly as well. So I think a debate will take place in the House of Commons as a result of a petition that was signed. I think you were seeing numbers going up as you watched the screen. It reached a level where it has to be discussed in the Houses of Commons. So I think we have got a job to do to ensure that our parliamentarians talk about real issues. They all like to talk about living side by side, but I don't think living side by side is the same as living with. And I think Haneen's pointed that out as well. So I think we need to make sure that our parliamentarians raise the right questions and ensure that sanctions are applied, not just stopping supplying arms to Israel, but actually ending the arms trade with Israel, and also banning, at least for a minimum, any goods coming from illegal settlements. So I think that's one challenge that we need to take immediately and make sure that our MPs raise the right questions in that debate. The second one is actually the threat that the BDS itself faces from the government. The government is actually put in the Queen's speech, proposed legislations that is going to actually make BDS illegal. Okay, so I think we need to publicize that, and we need to campaign against. And the Palestine Solidarity Campaign has had some really great successes in that sense. We've actually won the court battle all the way up to the Supreme Court, but we now need to defend that against new legislation they want to bring. It will make it illegal for us to make victories like we did with Veolia, when Veolia was forced to divest from Israel. It's going to stop us from using our pension funds to make sure that these funds are not invested in companies that profit from Israel's occupation. It would stop us from ensuring that all our procurement by the public bodies like the councils and everyone else is ethical. And so we need to campaign on that. There is already a campaign nationally that's outside of Palestine Solidarity Campaign against Kill the Bill. And I think we need to become part of that. So I think keep a watch out on our websites, both nationally and West Midlands PSC website. And hopefully we will build a campaign, particularly for the 14th of June, ensuring the debate demands sanctions, and then make sure that we can actually liaise with enough people, form strong enough coalitions to beat any threats that we face from the government. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Naeem. I have several questions. I mean, some of them you actually addressed, like the whole issue about the future, the state, the relationship. I think both of you talked about that vision. So thank you for those who raised this question. We have a question to you, Rachel, which is basically trying to ask, how did you learn about the Nakba? How did you first started to talk and question this and breaking this consensus or this silence? And then maybe just put a couple of questions, and then I give you both chance to respond. So that is one question. The second, there's questions about which you talked about, Haneen, is how the recent event brought Palestinians, West Bank, Gaza, 48. I mean, you did talk about it, but I would say, what is the implication maybe? What did that mean? Okay, I mean, we know that's brought them. You did say that how this event brought them together. And I have a question, which is, I think it is important because not everybody knows how to deal with it, for both of you, which is how can we best support better understanding between Palestinians and Israelis, working to end the occupation. Okay, let's take this, and I think apologies if some of the question I didn't raise, but I think it's some of it being, addressed in the conversation that Haneen and Rachel had. So,
Marwan, can you repeat the first question, please?
First question was to Rachel about how did she learn about the Nakba? What did she learn? How did she break away from the main discourse in Israel? Okay, to you, the question, I mean, you can comment on this, because we also as a Palestinian, we didn't learn about the Nakba in the Israeli curricula, etc. We learned it outside. To you, there is a question about how the last events brought the Palestinians together. How did it bring the Palestinian 48, 67, and what is the implication for that? And question for both of you, how can we best support, Palestinian Israelis who want to end the occupation? So I'll start with you, Rachel, but let's say we already on the time we should be finished, but I want to give you the last 5 minutes, maybe, between two of you to address this issue. So, Rachel.
So as to how you can support, from what I hear and from your announcement, it sounds like you are supporting, and thank you for that, and you should be continuing to do that. Even now, I mean, kind of a ceasefire was achieved, but that's not the end, and we all know that we are counting the days and months until the next attack on Gaza, unless something fundamental changes. So we need to keep pushing. It has been really encouraging to me, and I think to everyone here who is involved, to see so many protests around the world, so many acts of legislators, and public speakers and celebrities. I think it gives a lot of encouragement, and this momentum should be kept and should continue to build a stronger movement. Of course, I can't legally say support BDS, so understand this yourself, you already do. And continue to educate yourself about the Nakba and the origin of Zionism. That also answers your first question. To me, I can't go in length because it was a very long process for me that is still ongoing, but there's a lot of education that we all should do to decolonize our minds, really. It's a lifetime, it's a work of a lifetime. I can invite you to Zochrot's website. It's in 3 languages, and you can read a lot of materials about displaced Palestinian localities, about the origins of Zionism, and about visions of return and how we can get there. So that's it for me, I think.
Yes, thank you, Rachel. And I do, yes, also endorse very strongly to visit the website. I don't know if you had also some years ago an app. I don't know if it's still active. So
yes.
It's very informative. It gives you a lot of information that will help.
Yes, so can I just, 30 seconds, we have an app called the Nakba, thanks for reminding me. You can download it on Apple Store or Google Store and install it on your cell phone, and it's actually a map of Palestine with all of the displaced villages, towns and cities, actually a map of what has been lost and what should be restored, and it's an enlightening experience to follow this map, especially if you are here, and it actually can navigate you to places that aren't there anymore, sadly, but you are welcome to check it out and learn more about Palestinian history.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. To you, Haneen, well, 3 minutes. You will have 3 minutes, and then we will wrap up on the meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, how can we best support better understanding between, this was the first, It is not a matter and issue of misunderstanding. It is not to understand. So if this is not the framing, it is not that we misunderstand the Israelis and the Israelis misunderstand us. It is an oppression, a struggle against oppression, a struggle for justice, a liberation struggle, a struggle against colonialism. So what to do in order to support justice, not support the Palestinians, support justice. is again accountability, and this means in three tools. To raise awareness about how Israel legalized racism inside Israel, inside 48. Because for Israel, it is defending itself. The most powerful claim for Israel, the keyword for legitimacy, that I am defending myself. Okay, we are all terrorists. The Palestinians are a people of terrorists. So you have 2 million terrorists in Gaza, 2-3 million terrorists in Jerusalem and Hada. What about the 1 million who don't even throw stones, who just demonstrate? So if Israel use the word democracy, and democracy have the right to defend itself, let's examine, let's test this democracy, not regarding Israeli crimes on Gaza and West Bank, regarding the Israeli legal and political system in 48. In Israel, there is 85 racist laws which legally discriminate against the Palestinians. So it's a built-in, it is the definition of the state, is to be anti-Palestinian, to be against the Palestinians, to give the resources to the Israelis, and to deny the identity of the Palestinians. As you said, there is in the curriculum, we don't study. So 85 laws, and there is an index, a list in English, in Adala website, in English, and translate the list and pick 6, 10, 12 laws to see the way, the sophisticated way Israel define public interest. Public interest is Jewish interest. To develop the Negev is to Judaize the Negev. To develop the Galil is to Judaize the Galil. So, raising awareness, let's have Israel talk about itself. No ideology, no interpretation, laws. The book of the Israeli laws. In Israel, there is no constitution. Second of all, how I think Israel is also oppressing the international public opinion and the official public opinion outside Israel. So to start to talk about that the European is starting to lose their own liberty, not just the Palestinians. Yani, when I was 10 years Knesset member, in each meeting with an ambassador, a European diplomatic, a European journalist, all of them, most of them said to me, no, we cannot, yes, we support you, yes, we believe, but we cannot express ourselves. It is not convenient. We will lose our support, we will lose. So the Zionist lobby, Israel, is not just oppressing the Palestinians. It is changing laws inside England. Israel has changed laws. Tzipi Livni, when Palestinians threat, it was under threat, Tzipi Livni, of being arrested. So the British legal system has, Britain has changed some laws within Britain. So Israel is starting to interfere in the internal and local European issue. And this is a matter we can link between the liberal, that Israel is also a threat to more liberal Europe, a liberal Europe. It is entering the balance of power between the right wing and the left wing in Europe. It is not a Palestinian issue. Zionism has become an international issue. And third, the BDS, because legitimacy again. And the BDS is the only very civic and peaceful way to challenge Israel and to fight against racism and oppression and colonialism. So the BDS can send a message to the Israeli public opinion, but can also make Israel accountable. And for me, is nothing better and nothing more than make Israel accountable by examining the internal agreements, economic agreements between England and Israel, upgrading. Israel Israel is upgrading its relation, didn't stop to upgrade its relations with Europe, even in 2008. In 2008, when Israel has declared the siege on Gaza, few months after this declaration about the siege, the OECD has accepted Israel as a new member. Israel became a new member in the OECD. So it seems that Europe doesn't care to upgrade. And I think, and we know, I will not tell you what Israel or the Zionist lobby and the Zionists in England did with the Labour Party and with Jeremy Corbyn. I think this becomes an internal European and internal English issue. This is what I.
Thank you very much, both Haneen and Rachel. I think it was a very really informative and inspiring, in a way, discussion. You helped us to understand what is the Nakba meant, what after that, what was the implication, how the Palestinians who remained in their homeland, in their land, become a minority, divided, fragmented, Israeli Arabs, Arabs in Israel, etc. And then, you know, highlighted the different legal systems. I mean, it's worth really looking in Adala's website to understand how the state is actually operates to keep this control. And I think for you, Rachel, you raised the challenge is how to decolonize the Israeli society, public opinion, how to raise awareness, how to acknowledge what's happened, that this is a long journey. But the message that we got from you, that this journey and this vision is based on equality and justice in a society that will really live in existence, but based on the principles of rights between these two communities. So thank you very much, and have a good evening, everybody. We have a wonderful 140-50 people who joined us this evening.
Shukran, thank you.
Haneen.
Thank you very much.
Shukran, Toda. Thank you all so much.
Rachel.
Thank you.
And thank you, Naeem and James, for being in control of the system, and for Martin for being with us beforehand, and for everybody from Palestine Solidarity and you this evening. Have a good evening.